Hello there, MAGA Patriots, constitutionalists, freedom-loving people all around the globe. I'd love to start out with something provocative, but I can't, because I take the first part of this video, the first few minutes, and I use it also on YouTube to direct people over to my Rumble channel. So I'm sorry if you can just stay through the less provocative, less interesting, less unrestrained part. I keep thinking, what is something that's very anodyne, blasé, that I can put on, that I want to talk about, but that I can put it on YouTube? Well, this is a great book. It's less than $5, $4.99 on Amazon. It's called How to Live 100 Years by Luigi Cornaro. I'll tell you why this book is so fascinating to me. Fascinating. This guy lived to 102, healthy. He was vibrant. So I got another book about him, and this was clearly based on preprints, thousands of scarce and hard to find books of these and other subjects. So the printing is not very good in this book, but I got it some time ago, and then I got this easier to read version. But he died at the age of 102, but get this, he was a Venetian nobleman. He lived in Venice, or Padua, and he wrote some treatises about his life. He was born in 1464 and lived to the age of 102, dying in 1566. Now, I'll tell you why this was interesting to me. It's because, I don't know, I just had this idea that living in the Middle Ages, oh, it's been so horrible, all the ignorance, blah, blah, blah. I mean, think about it. He died in 1566. Well, Nicholas Copernicus, he died in 1543. Now, he studied medicine and law in Italy, which is where Luigi Cornaro lived. But as you know, Nicholas Copernicus said that the sun was the center of the solar system, and the earth and the planets went around it. So, I know a lot about Nicholas Copernicus. He did not publish his work until he was on his deathbed, basically. He'd written it like a decade or so before that. So it was called the heliocentric, and it took a long time to catch on. But let me just point out about this Luigi Cornaro, which I found so interesting. He wrote 4 discourses. The first was written at the age of 83, the second at 86, the third at 91, and the fourth at 95. Now, he was a very active member of his community. And his basic idea, he was judged by the doctors of the day that he was not going to live, he was going to die sometime between 35 and 40, as did apparently a lot of people at that time. And he decided, and they said, unless you can kind of change your ways, if you will. And so he started eating very little. I guess food didn't agree with people's stomach in those days. I don't know why, but he basically he measured out like 12 ounces of this, and he also had wine, but it was bread, eggs, and the lighter meats were his staple foods, and practically no mention is made anywhere of fruits, salads, etc. So he didn't eat that, but he was very careful. But here's what, I gotta read you this. Okay, so he went with the medical things of his day. But may I go a step farther and show how favorable to recovery is a temperate life in case of accident. Now, what's cool about this is exactly my new philosophy. Not that I don't really like eat as sparingly as he does, but in terms of doctors. At the age of 70 years, I happened, as is often the case, to be in a coach, which, going at a smart rate, was upset, and in that condition, drawn a considerable way before the horses could be stopped. I received so many shocks and bruises that I was taken out with my head and body terribly battered and a dislocated leg and arm. He was 70 years old. This is in like the 1500s. Think about this. When the physicians saw me in so bad a plight, they concluded in 3 days I should die, and thought they would try what bleeding and purging would do in order to prevent inflammation and fever. Because remember, at that time, it was thought that in your blood and in the humors, which would be like your lymph nodes and any kind of fluids in your body, this was where the bad stuff was, and you needed to bleed it. But this is what's so interesting. But I, on the contrary, now he believed the doctors that I guess bleeding was okay, but not for him. Knowing that by means of the sober life I had lived for so many years, my blood was in good and pure condition. I just love this. Refused to be either purged or bled. So back then you could refuse medical treatment. I just caused my arm and leg to be set and suffered myself to be rubbed with some oils. So he made a choice. Like, I've often thought, well, yes, I will go to a doctor, you know, if I got an accident or I need to set a bone, but I'm not getting any more other types of medical treatments. Then, without using any other kind of remedy, anyway, he just let it heal, and he was okay, and they were surprised. But he was he wouldn't take on the doctors directly because, of course, the doctors were amazingly good. But he talks a lot about stuff, and I underlined so many things that I wanted to read to you, but I don't need to go into too much. But he said, it's impossible to be a perfect physician to another. A man cannot have a better guide than himself. So he said, of course, you know, the doctors, they know a lot. But you have to pay attention to what foods agree with you. You know your own body. Hello? Deborah Castleman talking here. This is exactly, but this was so long ago. But here was what was really amazing. So when he was 95 years old, I mean, he wrote how his brain was so clear, and he was still doing things with the community. Apparently he was involved in city improvement, so he was still active. And he played with his grandchildren, he was very happy, and his garden, and he was always making improvements to the city, and he loved meeting with other people and having discussions, and he said my senses, meaning I guess my eyes and my ears, were just really good, and his brain had never been so sharp. And he also commented that his voice, he loved to sing, that most people's voices get weak as they get older, and we certainly see that. They get weaker voices, and they're hoarse, they sound weird. But he said, my voice is just so sonorous and beautiful. I mean, it has grown so strong and sonorous that I cannot help chanting aloud my prayers morning and night instead of whispering and muttering them to myself, as was formerly my custom. So this is 95 years old. And he was convinced that when he passed away, he would just go to sleep. But he had no pains, nothing. And again, 95, this is his writings. What a comfort is this, that old as I am able, without fatigue of mind or body, thus to be fully engaged and to study the most important, difficult, and sublime subjects. And then, you know, he was very religious, and so he says, now, you know, at age 95, I enjoy two lives, and the thought of terminating this earthly life gives me no concern, for I know that I have a glorious and immortal life before me. I mean, this guy's so good. I mean, I actually like reading this one better because it has more information than the other shorter version, but the other ones are his writings. And I will, 10 minutes, oh my gosh. I'm stopping here, YouTube, and I'll go to more provocative subjects on Rumble.